Today, I have a very, very special guest that I'm interviewing, and he's all the way in New York. Given the time and the distance, we did it online, and you're going to get a good insight as to how he went from skeptic and hardcore researcher to a believer in energy healing and how it can heal cancer. Today, I'm privileged to be speaking to Dr. Bill Bengston, and he is a researcher and the president of the Society of Scientific Exploration. Tell us about what being on that Society of Scientific Exploration means and what they're actually looking for.
Well, about 35 or 40 years ago, this is slightly before I joined the society, but 35 or 40 years ago, a group of pretty big name scientists got together and said, we have too much editing in academia. We have too much censorship in academia, and some things are just off limits. So we're not supposed to look into things that bring down the scientific establishment. And they said, this isn't good. And so a group of people from Stanford and Princeton, University of Virginia, places like that, said, let's form a society where we can openly look into things which are challenging to the way we understand the way the world to work. So, for example, healing. Healing doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means we have a great deal of difficulty trying to understand it. Yeah, my niche is in healing, but as with anything in the society, it has to be research-based, has to be data-based. So we don't just make stuff up and say, I believe this or I believe that. If you're going to present, we have an academic peer-reviewed journal. We have a magazine for the general public. We have these annual conferences. And if you're going to get up there and talk about it, you got to talk about data. Show me what you did. Show me how you did it, and show me your stuff. It's not a hypothetical society. It's one based on rigorous science.
Tell us about some of your amazing research and some of the work that you've been able to achieve and accomplish over the last decade and beyond.
Well, a long time ago, I came across somebody who spontaneously developed healing powers, and he fixed my back. And that was kind of rude, you know, because I had walked around with a bad back for many years. I had actually given up a swimming scholarship in college because of a bad back. And this guy came, and I was in just aching pain most of the day. And this guy rudely came along, put his hands on my back, and I haven't had a back pain since. And so what do you do when something like that hits you in the face? I didn't seek this out. But one possibility is you pretend it didn't happen. And the other possibility is you try to figure out what happened. And for better or for worse, I went down the second road to try to figure out what in fact happened to me. And so as he developed into a healer, I developed into a watcher, and then eventually someone who joined him in the healing. And we tried to figure out, you know, what does this stuff work on? And so human patient after human patient, there's an inexhaustible supply of people in pain out there. And people started to come to him, then started to come to us, and we found out this isn't magic in any way. Some things respond pretty quickly, some things respond not so quickly, some things respond not at all. Isn't one homogeneous magical category where, you know, you go hocus pocus and everything is fine. The healing is amenable to scientific study and to try to figure out what are the patterns, what are the rules, what actually goes on when healing happens. In our system, and I'm not speaking of anyone else, any other kinds of healing, and I don't even know how many kinds of healing there are, but I've focused on the stuff that happened to me. It turns out in this particular system, we're good at some things, not so good in other things. The things we're good at tend to be growth that can be taken away. Inflammation that can be taken away. Things that you don't want that you can take away, we're very good at. And so, for example, any form of inflammation will almost immediately disappear when we do our healing technique. I think that our healing technique is the fastest and strongest anti-inflammatory known.
Wow.
It simply gets rid of inflammation. If you have plaques on the brain, you have Alzheimer's, we seem to be able to take those away. And we take them away very, very quickly. If you have malignant tumors, the malignant tumors are taken away very quickly. And so cancer responds, Alzheimer's responds, inflammation of all types respond. Some things that are on the flip side don't seem to respond as well. So, for example, benign growths don't seem to respond at all. If you've got even a wart, the wart is benign, it's not life-threatening in any way, and we don't seem to affect it. It's kind of interesting. And you say, well, it's only a wart, but it's still, this is, something's going on here. We don't seem to be able to do warts. We do seem to be able to do malignancies. That's pretty interesting. We haven't had any success at all with Parkinson's disease.
Okay, wow. So when you talk about inflammation, that is really interesting because it can go from something as small as, leaky gut that's caused an inflammation in the system, which could be showing up in terms of what you see on your blood test results as high cholesterol, for example, and other things, to bigger things, as in what you're saying, like cancer, which I read about some of your research and your trials on.
So what I did is, after watching a few hundred people, and it works on this, it doesn't work on that, it's stronger on this than that, things along those lines. After watching a few hundred people, I realized that I couldn't unravel this. I didn't know how to make sense out of it. And so I went into the lab and said, we have to do this under very, very controlled conditions. And so I take my general way that I approach research is I take something that's already thought to be known, something that's already thought to be understood, and then I introduce a single variable, which is healing. And so I went into the lab. This started out at City University of New York, and then it expanded, and now it's been done in 16 different places. But we take something like a cancerous mouse model that's already understood. It's orthodox. Biologists study it all the time. There's publications about it. We know everything about it. And so, for example, a mammary cancer, you take a mouse, you inject it with a certain number of cancer cells, and 100% of them will die in a specified length of time. Then and this is published, no matter what you do to the mice, you give it chemotherapy, you give it radiation, you starve it, you feed it, you give it grapefruit, the mouse is going to die in a month. And we come along and we do the healing technique and we see what happens. And what happens is the mice get cured. And the mice are not only cured, but they're cured for their entire lifespan. And they cannot, with re-injections for their entire life, they can't be given cancer again.
Wow. So not only have they been healed and cured and not getting it back, but they've basically even developed maybe antibodies or something where their system won't take that cancer cells again.
Yep.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
I should know in a month whether it's antibodies or what it is. We have the studies are going on as we speak. I got lab data coming in weekly. Sure. And so far it seems as if that something is being stimulated in the immune system, at least in the case of cancer. And the interesting thing is that this is essentially, it's remembered by the body of the mouse. Presumably it's also remembered by the body of the human, but it's remembered by the body of the mouse. And so the mouse, once cured, once it's developed or gotten the information on how to fix it, it doesn't lose that information. And I can take it a step farther. We can take blood out of that mouse, put it into another mouse that has cancer. That next mouse will be cured too.
Wow.
So we can pass on the cure from mouse to mouse.
That's brilliant. And I mean, I can just imagine what that could do to humanity in terms of people that are getting sick. Almost every day here you hear about people that get either diagnosed with autoimmune diseases or cancers or tumors or something that sure. is pretty devastating, really, especially if they're a young mum or a young father or somebody who's, beginning their life. They may not actually even be an older person per se.
Sure. Yep.
And all of a sudden they're looking at a death sentence. And imagine how refreshing it is to hear about your research and the work that you're doing. And it's not just a healing that is unsubstantiated, undocumented, unheard of, that just is miraculous or spontaneous. It's actually some researched, clinically and medically sort of documented as well.
Yeah, I have a great deal of research at this point, and they're in independent labs because I'm a skeptic. You know, I
Right.
can't. It happened to me, a skeptic though I am. It did happen to me. You know, I can't. I don't want to deny it. I'm trying to be bound by what's real.
Yeah.
For better for worse, this stuff is real. And then I go into the lab and the stuff is real. And so I've got 16 mice experiments in multiple independent labs. I've got it twice that many cell studies. I've got. And so I've been doing this for a whole bunch of years. And I'm trying to develop a system whereby we can, as you imply, we can scale it up. Wouldn't it be interesting if this mouse can cure this next mouse? You can see the implication here of a vaccine. Can we make a vaccine? That would
Yep.
be fun. Could we
Ab-
make a storage of healing in some way that can be scaled up? Because there's almost an inexhaustible supply of people in pain out there. And this isn't a pain remedy, but it seems to, it's got some power. If you've got certain conditions, so far we haven't been able to jiggle that condition. So, for example, Parkinson's, we're just nothing that's particularly interesting about Parkinson's happens when we do this stuff. And that's a clue to trying to unravel what in fact is going on here. You know, so I don't yet understand this crazy healing. I do know that it happens. I do know in the case of cancer, the animals are cured for life. I know there's also a dose response. It's not magic where you just go hocus pocus. There is a minimum amount of treatment necessary. If given that critical mass of treatment, the mice will then go into full cure. And they go
okay.
through in law-like patterns. So we understand what the stages of cure are now, and we seem to be able to store the healing in mice. We seem to be able to store the material in materials, organic materials, inorganic materials. It's reasonably interesting.